This is lesson 4. In this lesson, we'll be discussing subphylum Uniramia, and this is the last of the subphyla we'll be talking about in phylum Arthropoda. So first, let's review the classification. We're in phylum Arthropoda still. We have been for the past few lessons. We talked about subphylum Chelicerata. Those were scorpions, ticks, and spiders. Last lesson we talked about subphylum Crustacea. Those are the crustaceans, crabs, lobsters, shrimp, pill bugs also fit in there. And in this lesson we're talking about subphylum Uniramia. And in this subphylum we have class Diplopoda, which are millipedes, class Chilopoda, which are centipedes, and class Insecta, which are insects. So here's the definition of what a Uniramian is. Here are the characteristics that all of these animals fit. Uniramians have jaws, one pair of antennae, and unbranched appendages. So just to review, spiders didn't have jaws. That's why they have to inject and kind of digest their prey before they can suck it up. Well, Uniramians have jaws. They can chew and have that movement to actually chew their food and then digest it. All Uniramians have one pair of antennae. This is a centipede, and here's his one pair of antennae. Crustaceans had two, if you remember from the last lesson. And then Uniramians have unbranched appendages. So here's this centipede with its just unbranched appendage. Contrast that with a crustacean appendage where there are branches on the appendage. So no branches in subphylum Uniramia. We only have just straight, no branching appendages. So let's first talk about class Diplopoda. The common name is millipedes, and they have two pairs of legs per body segment. So that's what the name means. Diplo means two, poda means feet. So 2 legs or feet per body segment. And you can see that in the picture here. Now millipedes is their common name, and that literally means 1,000 legs. Millipedes don't have 1,000 legs. The number of legs depends on the species, and they can be quite numerous. So that's why the name was given. It appears like they have lots of legs, 1,000 legs, millipedes. They live under rocks and in decaying logs, and there is a reason for this. That's because they're detritivores, so they feed on dead and decaying material. So here's a millipede, a diplopod, eating some dead leaves. They feed on dead and decaying material. And then unlike centipedes, they are timid animals, and when disturbed they may roll into a ball to protect themselves. So here's a millipede, a diplopod, rolled into a ball trying to protect itself. Some millipedes also may secrete unpleasant or toxic chemicals. They are generally not very dangerous to humans. Class Chilopoda, again, that's a CH that makes a K sound. These are centipedes. And the way I remember class Chilopoda from class Diplopoda, centipedes starts with a C and Chilopoda does as well. So that's how I remember Chilopoda are centipedes. And then Diplopoda means millipede, and the diplo means 2, so they have 2 legs per body segment. Now chilopods, centipedes only have 1 leg per body segment, and you can see that here. Very well defined body segments, 1 leg per body segment. The big difference between chilopods and diplopods, besides legs per body segment, is chilopods are carnivorous. So they eat other animals, and they have mouth parts that include a pair of venomous claws. So that venom, depending on the species, can be harmful to humans. And they use their claws to catch and then stun or kill their prey, and then they can chew it up and eat it. Chilopods usually live beneath rocks or in the soil, and their spiracles can't close. So these are the tubes, the holes on the side of their body that they use to let air in through a tracheal system to get air to their body. These holes can't close. They do close in insects, but they're just open, and so they can dry out really easily. They can lose water. And so this restricts centipedes to moist or humid areas. Okay, now we're on class Insecta, and this should be pretty easy. Class Insecta means insects, and I love learning about insects. I had an entomology class, which is the study of insects, in college, and I just really, really enjoyed it. And were we in a regular zoology botany class, we would be making an insect collection. But since this is online, we can't really do that, so we're just going to learn about insects. So first of all, I want you to take a look at this chart. This chart is representing the number of species on Earth, discovered species. And you can see that insects is this big blue chunk, and insects make up most of the species of life on Earth. They make up more than half, and that includes animals we've talked about, plus mushrooms, plus algae, plus viruses, plus bacteria, plus plants, okay? All other life on Earth, all of those species are still not as numerous as the number of species of insect on Earth. This is just another chart, another way to look up at the same information, except for this is breaking down the types of insects. So Homoptera and Hemiptera, these are insects that are called true bugs. Box elder bug is a good example of one that we have around here in Utah. You can see that beetles make up most of the species in the insect class. There are lots and lots of beetles. Hymenoptera, those are bees and wasps and ants, a lot of those. Lepidoptera, those are butterflies and moths. Diptera are flies, and then there are lots of other smaller insect orders. So you can see still by this chart, if you combine all these insect orders together, insects are still more numerous than all other animal life and plant life and fungi life. So that's interesting to know. Insects are huge. There are a large amount of them, and our ecosystems really depend on them, and we depend on them for performing those functions in our ecosystems. So just to summarize, insects are the most numerous and diverse of all group of arthropods. So if we look back, if we go back a slide, here are arachnids, and here are other arthropod classes. So those are like centipedes, millipedes, the horseshoe crab, crustaceans, okay? These are the other arthropod classes we've talked about. And then here are insects. So arthropods are a huge part of life on Earth. They're very, very successful, and insects are definitely the biggest chunk of that. So there are more species of insects than species of all other animals combined. And if we expand that, and there are still more species of insects if you add in plants, fungi, and bacteria to the rest of the animals. So insects, there are lots and lots of species of insects. They're very diverse, they perform a lot of different functions, and they've been very successful here on Earth. So let's talk about the insect body plan. There are 3 body segments. Insects have 3 body segments. Remember, spiders had 2, crustaceans had 2 or 3 depending on the species. But here we have a head, we have a thorax, and we have an abdomen. So insects have 3 body segments. And they have 3 pairs of legs, or 6 total, and they are all attached to the thorax. You can see that in the picture. 1, 2, 3, this is the thorax, and the legs are attached to the thorax. So if you remember a little movie called A Bug's Life, this is Flick. It kind of looks like he has 3 body segments, maybe, a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. But he only has 4 legs, which is incorrect. Insects have 6. And one's attached to the thorax and one's attached to the abdomen. That's not correct. All legs are attached to the thorax in an insect. Insects usually have 2 pairs of wings, and they are attached to the thorax, although some insects just have 1 pair of wings or none. This is a picture of a crane fly. It's a type of fly. Diptera is the scientific name for flies, and di means 2 and ter means wing. So flies are only 2-winged. You can see they have 2 big wings here, and then they do have, these are called halteres, which are where a second pair of wings would be, but they've been reduced. So flies have 2 pair of wings. Some insects don't have wings at all, but if they do have wings, there's usually 2 pair, so 4 wings total, and they're attached to the thorax. Feeding. There's a big diversity of feeding mechanisms within insects. Carnivores, herbivores, detritivores, omnivores, parasites. If you can think of it, a species of insect probably eats it. There are insects that are parasites that eat other insects. Insects eat, catch prey, they eat on plants, they eat dead things, they eat lots of things. So there's a large diversity. Insects have a complete digestive system, so they have a mouth with the stomach and an intestine and then an anus. And they have a wide variety of mouth parts for feeding. So they've adapted their mouth parts to eat different types of food. So here's a beetle. Beetles have chewing mouth parts. They have these big sets of jaws that help them chew. Butterflies and moths, their mouth parts have adapted into a large sucking proboscis. So they drink the nectar and suck up food that way. This is a bug. They've adapted their parts to pierce and suck up the insides of other insects, of other animals. And then a bee has adapted their mouth parts. They're kind of like sponges. They kind of sop up the nectar and then bring it into their mouth. So for respiration, all insects have a tracheal system with spiracles on the outside to let air in and out. And the spiracles are often located on the abdomen. Usually a spiracle has a valve or other closing mechanism that cuts down on water loss. So remember, centipedes didn't have this, but insects do. So they have a hole on the outside and then a system of tracheal tubes that delivers oxygen and to the muscles and takes the carbon dioxide out. All insects have an open circulatory system, just like all other arthropods. All arthropods have an open circulatory system, and so do insects. Excretion, how they get rid of waste. They have Malpighian tubules. Remember, crustaceans didn't have Malpighian tubules. They excreted by diffusion, but they have this series of Malpighian tubules that collects the waste, and then they insert it into the intestine, and it gets defecated out of the anus. Response. Insects have several ganglia, or sometimes they've been fused to become a small brain, and they have a nerve cord. They have very sophisticated sense organs. They have compound eyes, which you see here. This is a fly. Compound eyes allow them to see very well, and they have other organs to hear and smell, and antennae for touch and smell. And depending on the species of insect, the antennae are greatly diverse, and they are used for different things. A really kind of branching or plumose antennae here allows them to detect their sense of touch much more than something like that of a fly, where they use their antennae for smelling. So if you see a fly land on a piece of food, you'll see them kind of touch it with their antennae. They're smelling. Movement. Like all other arthropods, insects have muscles that push and pull on their exoskeleton. And the diversity of leg shapes, of appendage shapes, helps each species survive in its niche. So diving beetles have appendages that have adapted to form little frills that help them paddle. It's like a big oar. Some crickets have really big legs that help them dig. Jumping legs in fleas help them jump really high. Pollen-carrying legs in bees help them carry pollen. And in a butterfly, they use their foot to help clean their eye. So lots of diversity of legs on insects. Now on to reproduction. Fertilization is usually internal, so males deliver the sperm directly into the female. There are various ways of attracting mates. Moths gives off pheromones, which is a smell that the males detect and can come and mate. Fireflies use flashes of lights on their rear ends, and others have different courtship behaviors. After being fertilized, the female lays the eggs, so it's external development, and they usually lay them on a particular type of plant. For example, monarch butterflies look for milkweed plants. So here's a monarch on a milkweed, and then the eggs will hatch and the caterpillars will eat the milkweed in the case of the monarch butterfly. One big thing about insects is that they have metamorphosis. And metamorphosis is simply the process of changing form. And you've probably learned about this since grade school. The life cycle of a butterfly, they go from an egg to a larva, which is a caterpillar we call, to a pupa, to an adult butterfly. Beetles have the same type of metamorphosis. They start out as an egg, go as a larva, develop into a larva, hatch into a pupa, and then hatch again into an adult. Some insects have what's called incomplete metamorphosis, where it looks like they're just getting a bigger version of themselves. So they don't go from an egg to a larva to a pupa to an adult. They just look like they're getting bigger versions of themselves every time they molt. So a lot of students have a misconception that a caterpillar is not an insect. Well, first of all, is it an animal? Yes, it is multicellular, eukaryotic, heterotrophic, and its cells lack cell walls, and it performs all of the 7 characteristics of survival. They feed, they breathe, they move, but is it an insect? And the answer is yes. It does turn into a butterfly, and we know that a butterfly is an insect, but you're like, but what about all these little legs here? Insects only have 6. Well, insects only have 6 true legs. Here are you can only see 3 here, but the other 3 are on the other side. These are the true legs, and then these are just false legs. They're not legs, they're extensions off of the abdomen. It feeds. They have this, although it doesn't look like an exoskeleton, this is an exoskeleton and the muscles are pulling on it. So yes, a caterpillar is an insect. Any form of an insect, whether it be a pupal or a larval stage or even an egg, it's an insect. It fits the definition of what an insect is. 3 body segments, 6 legs, and it fulfills those 7 characteristics of survival. So now, just in closing, I want to give you some common names of some insects and show you that insect life is very diverse. So we have dragonflies. Dragonflies are insects. I'm not going to do this for all of them, but you'll see it has 3 pairs, so the other 3 on the other side, on a thorax. The wings are attached to the thorax with a head and an abdomen. Grasshoppers are insects. Praying mantises are insects. In the case of a praying mantis, the front appendages have evolved into this grasping and catching appendage, and then here are the other 2. Mantis have very long thoraxes, and these are its wings that look like leaves that help it camouflage in. Cockroaches are insects. Earwigs are insects. This is a box elder bug. They get really big and can be a really big pest here in Utah. These are called lacewings. They are an insect. Beetles are insects, and they are very diverse, lots of different types of beetles. Bees are insects. Wasps are insects. Ants are insects. And they all have these 3 pairs of legs, abdomen, thorax, and head. And then here are the wings attached to the thorax of the bee. Butterflies are insects. Moths are insects. Flies are insects. Katydids are insects. These are the ones, they're very closely related to praying mantis or grasshoppers. And then walking sticks are insects. So very large diversity of life, diversity of insects. And they have adapted in lots of places in the world and are very successful and are the biggest and probably most successful group of arthropods.